Hi, my name is Mindy Silva, and I have just recently finished my PhD with Otago's Rehabilitation and Teaching Unit. My PhD was essentially about behavior change and persuasive technology, or how we use technology to support our desired behaviors. So this presentation is about getting organized online, or more realistically, how we tame the online clutter and easily retrieve the information that we've saved online so that we can use it effectively. So there's really three pieces to the puzzle. One is to categorize the activities or things that we're doing online. Two is to match those to the applications or the software that we're using online. And then lastly is to design our behaviors around using those applications so they fit into our routine and we start to use them as part of our daily habits. So we'll start off with categorizing. Now, if you were to go into a room and it was just a mess and there was everything all over the floor, and you were to ask somebody who wasn't really sure how to categorize the different things on the floor just to tidy up, then probably if it was, say, a child in a messy room, they would just take everything and shove it all into one box out of sight under the bed in a cupboard somewhere, which might make the room look tidy. But when it came time to finding stuff again, you would very quickly get back into this messy, chaotic scenario. Because the truth is, to find things effectively, we first have to store them effectively. And so that means we have to understand how to categorize, how to group things together that make sense. So putting all the soft toys together, putting all the Lego pieces together, putting all the Barbie dress-up dolls together, so that when you need that specific thing, you know which box to go to and where to find it. And when we're talking about categorizing, it's really what makes sense to you. There's not really a right way to do it. And this is a lovely example of categorizing in a way that makes sense to somebody. That was published in a paper by Susan Michie, who, if you want to know anything about behavior change, that's a really good place to start. So in Michie's paper, they described an ancient Chinese classification of animals, where there were animals that belonged to the emperor, embalmed ones, those that are trained, suckling pigs, mermaids, fabulous ones, stray dogs, those that are included in this classification, those that tremble as if they were mad, innumerable ones, those drawn with a very fine camel's hairbrush, others those that have just broken a flower vase, and those that resemble flowers from a distance. Really, the point of this categorizing system is that if it makes sense to you and you know where to find these things again, then it works. So let's take a quick look at how we might categorize some of the behaviors we do online. So you might, for example, have certain things that you save online that are just for short-term use. So this might be something that you want to share with someone, something that you want to do or buy. Maybe it's a short-term project that you're working on and you're finding things related to those projects and storing them, but you're not going to need them long-term in the future. So there's these kind of short-term action categories. And then there's long-term resources. So things that you might be using as part of your research, academic articles, things that you might be using as part of your practice, say assessment tools or therapy ideas, things that you will refer back to time and time again as you need them over and over again. And you want to be able to draw those ones out quickly and use them effectively for whatever their use case is. Then there might be things that you have kind of those one-day things. So a course that you see that you might one day want to do, or maybe a piece of software technology that you might one day want to explore to see if it's useful for you to use. These are things that you're not going to be using now, but when you think about them and think about doing them, you don't want to have to start that Google search all over again to try and find what they were. And then, of course, there's your online learning stuff. So if you've done courses or you've read an interesting blog or you've attended webinars and you've got this learning material that you are both referencing as well as perhaps taking notes on, or those kind of things, you want somewhere to store those so that you can go back and reflect on them and draw up the information that you need. And then there might be something that's just interesting or fun. So maybe a quote or a picture that made you smile, or maybe some home decor ideas, things that you might be using or just wanting to save because they mean something to you, but maybe they're not something that has a particular function or purpose. So there's hundreds and hundreds of different applications online. And so I thought it might be helpful if I tell you what my categories are. These are just the ones that work for me at the moment where I am currently. I might change them or tweak them and which applications I'm using. So I have a category, or one category of things that I do online is just resources and cool stuff. So this is things that I might refer back to treatment ideas, quotes that I like, assessment tools, recipes, things that I'm just going to refer back to over time. And Evernote and OneNote are good examples of these. I tend to use Evernote for that because it has a really good search function, so you can find things really quickly, but also it has some really good widgets, so things that you can attach to your platform, like if you're using Firefox or Chrome or whatever it is to search the internet, there's widgets for Evernote that you can quickly, if you find something you like, store it into the right place in Evernote. So that works really well for me. For publications, so that's for my research, I use Mendeley, and Mendeley, I could store it in Evernote, but Mendeley has certain functionalities that really make it useful as a separate application to use. So Mendeley will draw out some of the metadata from the articles that I save into it. And by metadata, I mean things like the article title, the year it was published, the publication it was in, the author's names, all those kind of things. When I put something into Mendeley, which also has widgets that allow me to do that right from the search platform that I'm using. So if I'm on Firefox and I find an article I like, I click on the Mendeley widget, it puts it into Mendeley, draws out all that metadata immediately so that I can then use that metadata to reference my articles that I'm writing in Word, because Mendeley links to Word. So similar ones are Zotero, EndNote, Papers, many of those do the same things. Then links and online spaces. So I use Airtable for this one, basically to store any data. So things like links that I want to save to go back to other places, like memberships that I'm involved in, or courses that I've done, or webinars that I've done. I'm using those links so that I can find them easily again as data in a database, and Airtables is what I use for that. Trello and Google Sheets are also kind of good things for data storage, anything that you might traditionally have used Excel for. For example, these online ones just allow you to access it and use it much more effectively because they're online and accessible from anywhere. And then to-dos and task management, I use, again, I use Airtables for this because it's so versatile. But Trello, again, is a really nice one that people use for task management. Evernote has some really useful functionalities in terms of task management. You can set reminders, you can make notes on a meeting, it pops up. If you've got a meeting and you've linked Evernote to your Google Calendar, whenever your meeting comes up, Evernote will automatically generate a note for you that you can start taking meeting notes. So there's those kind of things that are really useful, and even just your online calendar to store tasks and stuff. Just as one extra category that I use, that's my to-dos and task management. And then my ideas and things that I want to do one day, I use Evernote for that as well. Again, there's OneNote, Trello, Pinterest, all those kind of things you might find useful for you. What's important though is that even if you're using something, say for task management or appointments, just because you're using an online resource doesn't mean you now throw away your paper stuff. There's certain activities that you might want to put as part of your task activities into an online platform so that they're always accessible or much more manipulable in terms of how you use them with dates and that kind of thing. And then you want to still keep your paper diary because that helps you to really stay organized, and it's on your desk and you can just flick it open to the right page and it's always visible for you. So like for me, I'm a very visual person, so I need to have that visual thing on my desk. And when I'm working on the computer on something else, I want to be able to refer back to my paper diary to see what I'm supposed to be doing that day. So I use them both together. I put all my to-dos, all my reminders, everything goes into Airtable, but then I still sit once a week and plan out my week and put that week into a paper diary or a planner where I kind of decide what I'm going to do for the week and actually physically cross those off. That physical act of crossing them off still really works for me. So it's what works well for you, and making them work together. There's certainly not one thing that works best for everything. Okay, so that's the categorizing, putting things into categories, really understanding your online behavior so that you understand where you want to have applications that are going to help you with that actual behavior. And so then the next step is to match that behavior to the category. So how do you decide which application is right for you? There are, as I've just said, so many that you can choose from. And there's a couple of things to look through when you're deciding which application to use for yourself. And the first thing is really just to look at other people's reviews. So if you go into Google and you type the app name, say Trello or Airtables, and then you type reviews afterward as your search, then you're going to come up with a whole lot of different users, other people who've used these applications, their reviews on what worked for them and what didn't. So just as you might look for a Airbnb or a restaurant to go eat at or something to do, and you look at people's reviews to get an idea of what worked for them or didn't, you can do the exact same thing with these applications. What do people like about it and what don't they like about it, and how does that match with your need for how you're needing this category of stuff online to be used? And these things that I've put here, the Trustpilot, Capterra, G2, Product Hunt, these are applications much like what you might use online to look at restaurants and B&Bs and that kind of things. These ones are dedicated to applications, or what they call SaaS, or software as a solution. So if you're looking at stuff and you find that it's generated by Trustpilot or Capterra or G2 or Product Hunt, you know that these are good sites that have verified that the people leaving reviews are actually reviewers, real people, and not just the people who are trying to promote the program, promoting themselves. So once you've kind of looked at other people's reviews and decided if this is something you want to look for, you might also just want to make sure that the application is sort of above board, you know. These ones that are very familiar, like Trello and Airtables, that are being used by everybody, are obviously safe, but you can also get really good deals on newer applications that might be not as well known, and just kind of knowing how to check that they feel safe and authentic is a good thing to do. So when you do look at the reviews, just look at the date of reviews. Old reviews are probably not a good idea to be going to, because it means that the applications are probably not being updated often enough to be useful as technology changes. The responsiveness of the company, if somebody's left a bad review, is somebody from the company tracking these, and is the company concerned about their reputation? Privacy statements, if you go onto the application, just look for their privacy statements and take time to just skim through it and see what's on there. Does it just look like some generic thing that somebody slapped on there, or does it look like it's a proper document that actually has some meaning? And then checking the contact details. Do they have an address? Do they have an email? Do they have a phone number, so that if you have a problem, you can get hold of them? These are really good things to check online to make sure that the applications you're using are trustworthy. And then once you've done that, then have a play with it. But when you play with it, protect your inbox. So if I'm using a new application, even if it's an application that's well known, I don't use my main email address to sign up initially, because just like you wouldn't give somebody a key to your house if you didn't know them. I have a sort of a junk email that I use whenever I sign up for a new application or something new, and all my junk stuff goes there, because whenever you sign up for these things, they're going to send you marketing stuff, they're going to send you advertising stuff, and so you don't want that clogging up your main inbox. So you have this sort of dummy Gmail address or whatever that you just use for playing with, and then you know you kind of most of the stuff in there is not really relevant to you. And when you decide that this is an app you're going to use, then you can re-sign up with your actual email address that you use every day. And so because you've signed up with a junk email address, and because you haven't yet decided if this is the right app for you, you're going to want to use dummy data to have a play with it. So don't put your real data in there straight away. Just kind of put stuff in, anything to kind of play around with, so that you get a feel for how the application works, if it works for you, how the pieces fit together, and play around with it. You wouldn't marry somebody without going on a date with them first and just getting to know them a little bit. And that's what you're doing here. You're playing and you're having a date with the application and seeing if it's a fit for you. And then test out and see if there's actually real humans behind the application that are working on it and concerned about it, about the reputation and how well it works for you, that sort of thing. So most of these applications have some way of reaching support. So click on them and ask support questions. See how long they take to respond. See if the response comes back as something that is useful to you. You want to know that if you run into problems, there's somebody that's going to respond to you to help you through it. Now, the really big applications, you know, like I don't know, Twitter and Facebook, you're not going to get a human responding to you there, because those things are so automated, and us minions, we don't get to talk to the people behind them. But most applications have a support team, real humans that will respond to you. And some of them are just using these kind of call centers where people are not really connected to the company. And you can tell by the kind of responses you get whether this is a company that's really concerned about their users and how their users are managing the app and the users' data, or whether it's a company that's just kind of outsourcing everything. So get a feel for it, check that it's a real human. And once you've done that and you feel it's a good fit, you're enjoying using the app, you trust that there's some sort of company behind it that has a good ethos and a good way of working, then you're going to kind of rate the app for yourself in terms of features, ease of use, whether it works across platforms. So for example, I work on Mac at home and a Windows at work, and sometimes I want to be able to cross connect those, and sometimes I don't, depending on what I'm working on. I have some apps that are only Mac specific, but I love them so much that I use them only at home, and then when I go to work I use something else. Features, do they match whatever it is that your category of work and your use case for it? Are there enough features to make that work for you? And how easy is it to use? There's so many applications that do such similar things that you don't need to be stuck with something that doesn't work for you. All our brains work differently. Some people are auditory learners, some people are visual learners. Something makes sense to you, doesn't make sense to somebody else. So when you get onto the app and you kind of click on different things and have a play around with it, if within the first few minutes you don't already get a feel or an understanding of how things are fitting together in this app, it's probably because you and the developer have a completely different way of thinking about things, and it's not a good match. So it should make sense to you when you get on it and you use it. It should make sense to you in terms of how the developer is thinking, because it's probably, if it makes sense to you, it's probably similar to the way you think and organize your own thoughts and categories and that sort of thing. And so then it's a good match. Like I said, you have to date and then you get married if you like it. And part of that is aesthetics. You need to enjoy using the app if it's going to become part of your everyday life and everyday routine. If you don't think it's a pretty app that works for you, you're probably not going to integrate it really well into your routine, and you're probably not going to use it as well as you should be. So aesthetics is important. And then when you've decided that this is an app that's going to work for you, or this software solution is going to work for you, then commit to it. Like, put in the time as you would in your relationship, where you actually commit time to develop an understanding of how the app actually works. So actually schedule time in your diary. When are you going to do it, and how much time are you going to schedule? I would say you need 2 to 4 hours to really just play. Click on all the buttons, put in the dummy data, see what works. I often have 2 screens up. I'll do like a Safari and a Firefox browser, and then I'll ding between the two to see what happens if I'm a test user and a this user, and I'll see how they work together and I'll have a play. You really do need to date your app. And I don't mean date in terms of how old it is. I mean, go on a date with it and spend time hanging out so that you get a feel for whether or not you like it. Okay. And then once you've decided that this is an app, you know how to use it, you like it, you understand what it does, you have to recognize that knowledge is not enough, because knowledge without action leaves you feeling frazzled and frustrated. So this is the design part. This is where you're going to design your behavior around using the app so that the app becomes part of your routine and part of your habits. And that doesn't happen unless you make a conscious effort to actually start integrating that app into your life. So the first thing about that is that less is more. And what I mean by that is, don't try and do everything all at once. You're not behind. You don't need to catch up. Just start where you are. So when you start using this app as, okay, I'm going to give them my real email address and I'm going to really start putting data in, just put the data in that you need right now. You don't need to go back and find all your to-dos and all your projects and all your articles and spend like a whole day trying to import and sort them out. You just build the information as you need it. As you recognize you need an article, you find that article and you bring it into the app. As you find something interesting online that you want to save, you save that in the app. And so start where you are and build it out as you go. The stuff that is wherever it is else before you started using the app will stay there, and you'll bring it across as you need it. You are not behind. You don't need to catch up. Start where you are. And then just master one. Don't try and do them all at once. You're not going to use Evernote and Mendeley and Trello and Airtables and kind of just throw everything at it and try and decide which categories go where, and you're going to start using this for that, and just don't do that to yourself. Start with one, get a feel for it, get a system in place where you're using it before you then bring in the next one to start using. So be the master of one and not just a slave to many applications where you don't know exactly where everything's going and how it's all using. That's not how we change our behavior for the better. And talking about changing behavior for the better, then I couldn't not talk about BJ Fogg and his Teeny Habits system. So BJ is a professor at Stanford, and he wrote the book on persuasive technology, and he's also written a really practical manual on how we develop habits in our lives. And it's really based around this idea of his Fogg behavior model, which is looking at behavior in terms of motivation, ability, and prompts. So B stands for the behavior, and when you're thinking about behavior and you're thinking about motivation, it's really important to recognize that motivation is a wave. It fluctuates. It goes up as you start something new, and then it goes down as that new thing is not new and exciting anymore. And what's important with motivation is to use it to your advantage, and not to try when you're motivated to do too much, but rather when you're motivated to think about designing your behavior around making it work for you when you're no longer motivated. That's what you should be using your motivation for. And by that, we mean really looking at the ability and prompt aspect of the behavior. So a prompt is really, a prompt or trigger is just the thing that triggers you to do the behavior. No behavior happens without a prompt. And so your prompt might be a thought, oh, I like this, I want to save it. Your prompt might be a email. Somebody sends you an email to say, do this, or have you read this? And that might be your prompt. You need to be really explicit about when you get this prompt, then you're going to use this app, even to the point where you're just writing it out. After this, then this is kind of the basics of the Teeny Habit formula. After I do this, then I will do that. So after I get an email, then I will save it to Evernote, for example. After I get a receipt, I will save it to Evernote. After I find an article that's relevant, I will save it to Mendeley. So kind of really being clear and explicit about your prompt or trigger. And then thinking about ability. So ability was a little bit what we were talking about earlier, less is more. To make things easy, you need to just make them small to start with. And if you make behaviors or expectations too big while your motivation is high, it's fine, you can manage it. But as soon as your motivation drops, and it will, then those big behaviors fall off the bandwagon. So keep the behaviors small that you're going to do. You're just going to do this step, and you're just going to do it until it becomes automatic and it feels really easy. And then you're going to add the next step. So that's about designing your behavior so that you have a prompt and it's small and manageable, and you're using your motivation to design the behavior so that it happens in your routine and you know when it's going to happen and when you're going to use the app. So you're kind of spending your time playing with the app and understanding how it's used. And then you're going to design your behavior around your prompt and ability. And then you're just going to integrate that into your day until it feels part of your routine. And then you're going to build on it. So you're going to be building on your behaviors, expanding them out with the apps that you're using, and expanding the content that you're bringing into the app as it becomes relevant. So that's really how you organize your life online so it doesn't feel chaotic. Categorize your behaviors, really know what behaviors you're doing online and for what purpose. Match the application to that category, and then design behaviors around using that application so that it becomes part of your routine and activity. I hope that's been helpful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.